So as I prepared for this keynote, I reflected on what unique perspective I can bring as a female airline captain, turned technology CEO, entrepreneur, venturing into all different worlds that makes me uncomfortable. And this was perfect. So as far as I'm aware, I am the only one trying to introduce virtual reality airline pilot training as an augment to simulator training into a traditionally male-dominated, conservative, and safety-focused industry, much like the insurance sector. So this photo captures a rare moment. It's only happened to me 3 times in my career. If you're ever wondering how to get everyone's attention on board, stand in front of first class and tell them that they are on an unmanned flight. Look, truth is, you likely know more about my profession than I know about yours, but I do know that our industries share something very important in common. We're both in the business of dealing with risk. By giving you a glimpse into how the airline industry effectively manages risk, I hope that you can use some of these ideas in your very important work. We do have a talent gap in aviation, and this is how my company is choosing to increase awareness to help solve and become part of the solution.
So, you want to become a pilot? It's easy. It's just 14 years of obsession, rigorous training, and learn a new language.
Then put in 1,500 flight hours.
It's simple. Learn aerodynamics, physics,
Meteorology!
and add being a mom.
Here, it's just another day in the office.
The work doesn't even stop there. You have to pass test.
After test. After test.
There's a pilot shortage out there, and only the best can fix it. That's why I'm here.
I'm here.
And we're here. You'll need imagination. Not many pilots look like me.
It's not like you're learning to fly just one plane. There's this one, and eventually, that one.
So yeah, that's how to become a pilot. Easy, right?
Thank you. I had nothing to do with that. So, I mean, it's such a problem, and we're going to talk a little bit about it later on in the presentation. The skills and experience gap, it's not only felt by the insurance industry, it's felt by every industry. And we need to solve this solution. We need to solve this together. The other day, my son came home after taking a test, after getting results from a test that he had taken, had studied very hard for it, was all bummed out. He got a 95. Of course, I empathized with him for getting a 95, and I said, you know, you worked really hard. You should be proud of it, of the work that you put in. There are times when 95% is not good enough, but your exam is not one of them. So eliminating risk really is impossible. So how safe is safe enough? Is it 95%? Raise your hands. Who thinks 95% is safe enough? What about 99%? No? I think we saw 99.96% for you guys. Still not good enough? You know this better than most, right? The further we move that needle to the right, the more difficult and expensive it gets. So let's say for a moment that we are willing to accept a 99.999% safe. What would that look like? In the US, airlines, if they were 99.999% safe, we would have a crash every 53 minutes. That's more than one per hour. The last crash we saw was in 2009, 15 years ago. It's pretty close to 100. But this does not happen by accident. And I'm just going to go through some strategies on how we mitigate this risk. We lead with safety. Everything else follows safety. Any attempts not to do so in the past have inevitably ended in disaster. And when you purchase a ticket on a US airline, safety is implied, right? It's expected. The airlines don't talk much about safety with the flying public, but throughout the airline, and particularly on the aircraft, you should know that safety is in the forefront of everything we do. Safety is the primary focus of every airline crew. There's a very strong culture of safety, and every member of that crew is expected to speak up when they see safety being compromised in any way. Airline captains are trained to empower their crew through crew resource management training. This was not always the case, and in decades past was a primary contributor to aircraft incidents. Highly trained employees and a strict adherence to standard operating procedures are designed to minimize risks throughout the operation. The Aviation Safety Reporting System is a federally funded program. It enables airline workers to report any safety issues anonymously without fear of retribution. Most airlines also have an internal safety reporting system that goes far beyond the federal program. And while we optimize and automate, these examples are keeping humans at the center. That knowledge that your CEO talked about, that we call it tribal knowledge, you can't let it walk out the door without passing it to somebody else. Data and analytics teams are constantly looking at and scrubbing data, looking for trends that may indicate an erosion in safety. FOQA, or the Flight Operations Quality Assurance Program, anonymously collects data from modern flight deck recorders on every aircraft every day. That data is then used to customize training and or change procedures and make the culture a continuously improving culture. So 99.999 is not an acceptable level of safety. But we know that risk cannot be eliminated, right? Without some tolerance for risk, Catherine, who often gets left out, Orville and Wilbur Wright would have never gotten off their bicycles and into an unproven wooden and fabric flying machine of their own design. But the airline industry spent decades attempting to completely avoid risk and came to realize that this was not possible. In the past 30 to 40 years, there's been a tidal shift so that now we admit that there are risks and then try to minimize these risks and effectively manage them. So, how do you perceive risk? Is that bad? In the next few slides, I will describe how we identify and mitigate risks. This is especially important with the expansion of the talent crisis. We begin every trip with an entire flight crew briefing. Pilots, flight attendants, everybody involved in the flight, it is likely that we do not know each other, have never seen each other before. United right now, I think, is up to 130,000 employees. But we may be called to work together flawlessly as a team to protect our passengers. This briefing is just a few minutes, but in it, we identify risks, we discuss how to handle them, we answer any questions that come up or concerns, and create a high-impact team environment that is prepared for the worst situations. At the end of each flight, pilots will debrief the completed flight. What went well? What didn't go well? What can we learn from this flight? And how will we handle these risks in the future? Additionally, when the airlines are developing new procedures from their Folkwood data, you can see I wish I had a slide on the process, they all must go through a robust safety risk assessment. This is part of the safety management system. And throughout this process, risks are identified and ranked. All parties then work collaboratively to lower the risk level to an acceptable number. I often get asked, hey, anything ever happened to you when you were flying? Were you ever scared? Was it ever harrowing? And the two events that come to mind, interestingly enough, both happened on the ground. And I love all those stories of it was a dark and stormy night. But mine wasn't. It was a hot and still summer evening in Houston. We were flying from Houston to Sao Paulo. This was our route of flight. And it's optimized for winds, pressures, temperatures, political avoidance. And of course, we want to find a smooth ride for you guys. It was going to be a long night. We had, the whole crew typically has a little bit of small talk in the gate area, things like that. And we introduce ourselves, where are you from, where are you commuting from, that kind of thing. And then we get let onto the airplane. And on the airplane, it's straight to business. So everybody stows their stuff, does all of their own safety checks, and then we meet in the first class section. So now I have 12 people settled into the first class area for the briefing. As the captain, I lead that, and I cover items like minor maintenance items, seatbelts that are not working, coffee pots that aren't working, things like federal air marshals, deportees, and then, of course, I talk about the route of flight. The turbulence conditions, I usually expand this. We say, okay, so about 2 hours in, we're going to hit that Florida coast. We probably don't want to be up and doing service. Make sure you button it up. Coming down through the Keys, by Cuba, into South America. It's looks like we'll have a nice smooth trip then, but when we coast in, we got more turbulence to deal with. So we step through it, right? And we will get updates. When we talk about this, we also talk to each other. So we are not the only flight going to Sao Paulo tonight. We got a flight out of Newark going to Sao Paulo. We got a flight out of Washington going to Sao Paulo. So we will communicate inter-aircraft. Hey, how's your ride? What altitude are you at? Things like that to find the smoothest, best ride for the passengers. And we always talk about a rejected takeoff. The briefing goes like this. In the event of rejected takeoff, you you know it will be abrupt. We will be maximum braking. You will be on your shoulder harnesses, right? You'll hear the first officer say, remain seated, remain seated. That is for the passengers. Please assess your exits. Make sure that nothing is blocked, and immediately inform us if somebody tries to egress the aircraft without any guidance. So at the end of that briefing, I say, that is all I have. Anything for me? And typically we have some little things, maybe maintenance items that they saw during their safety checks, and we get those addressed before we leave. After the all-crew brief on the flight deck, prior to each departure, the pilots discuss many things. A normal taxi-out departure procedure, breaks, food, how everyone is feeling, how they slept the night before. So, of course, we also discuss threats. Known knowns, unknown unknowns, technical issues, and what we would do. We get into very granular. What we'll do if there's an engine failure at the worst possible moment. What will we do if there's a fire on board? If we must do a high-speed reject? If that then turns into an emergency evacuation? Thankfully, most of us will never encounter one of these career-defining moments. But if we do, we are ready. Does anyone know what V-speeds are? I think I have one hand. All right, velocity speeds, just a quick review of V-speeds. There's a whole slew of V-speeds that we have to know, but on takeoff, there are two that are really important. V1 is the decision speed. Anything that happens prior to V1, it's a speed where you say, you know what, we can still stop on the runway and be safe. After we V1 and to rotation speed, VR, we treat it as an in-flight emergency, even though you're still on the ground. So if an engine fails at V1, you have probably an 8 potato count before you actually rotate. So you're on the ground, the engine fails, you bring it back to center, and it's 2 potato, 3 potato, 4 potato, VR. You're taking it into the air with one engine. So there's another very important speed. It's 100 knots. And it doesn't have its own V, but it's probably one of the most important out there on that we pay attention to. It's about 115 miles per hour. It does mark an important transition point during takeoff. While the dynamics of the aircraft change, the pilot's decision-making process must also shift accordingly. It's the speed at which the consequences of rejecting the takeoff become more significant, signaling the transition into a high-speed regime phase, where the aircraft is more committed to take off, and you can really feel it. It's a speed that the takeoff, on every flight, we identify the threats, right? And of the day-to-day, and we talk about what will happen at V1. And every time we do this briefing, prior to 100 knots, we'll call it out and you can reject. After 100 knots, we're only going to reject as an engine failure, any fire, inability to fly. Do you guys do that? The foot stomp? And wind shear. That's ground school. Whenever the instructor says something important, they stomp their foot. So it's habit. Sorry about that. So today we will depart after V1. We'll treat it as an in-flight emergency. Declare the emergency with ATC. So here's known unknown, right? We don't know what that emergency is, but we're briefing it. We're going to declare the emergency with ATC. We are going to run the appropriate checklist, and we're going to come back here and land in Houston for an overweight landing. Do not let air traffic control The flight attendants, the company, or anybody compress your time. They are on our time now. Time compression is very real when something happens. On this day, it was my leg, and I had just called for auto throttles. She was heavy. Luckily, I had the gift of a 12,000-foot runway. No hurry. My first officer was a pro. Our relief pilot was watching everything. The aircraft was responding. I have 63,000 pounds of thrust per side rolling down the runway. She's feeling like it's a great day for an airplane ride. We get to, I'm hearing my first officer making the call-outs, the thump, those, you feel the grooves in the runway as you go, and the acceleration keeps moving. And it never gets old, by the way. If you add power, 63,000 pounds of thrust is very thrilling. Everything's in the green. The expected call-outs are coming at the perfect time until he missed one. At that point, he said, 110 knots, birds. They came from right to left or north to south. In an instant, our calm flight deck turned into a flurry of warning lights. Flashing, red, yellow, orange, too many to assess in that moment. But despite the chaos, the decision had already been made. We had made that at the gate at V0. We found ourselves in an unsafe, unable to fly, well above 100 knots, but below V1. Muscle memory took over. As I pulled the throttles back, I disconnected the auto throttles, full speed brake. Speed brake's a wonderful thing. They kill the lift, so you really feel the airplane just come down, weight on wheels, and full reversers. That 63,000 pounds of thrust now is helping me stop. My one job was to stop this 350,000 pound bullet on the runway, on centerline, while I was dodging birds coming at me. It was really something. I felt like I was in a meteor shower from Star Wars. So this flock of birds, of course, we were in Texas. They were Texas pigeons, not small. And our priority shifted, right? Our priority shifted to following SOP and coordinating with everybody to ensure that they're safe. Airline procedures, industry regulations, new technology, manufacturer limitations, they're all designed to build safety margins into the system. Reality, however, is constantly putting on and attacking these margins. Weather, traffic, passengers, airline management, stock performance, other nonsense factors that have nothing to do on the flight deck seem to be conspiring to reduce safety. Ultimately, this is the most important role of the captain, the pilot in command, is to protect the margins. The human element is in the middle of all of this. The reject was textbook, and everything that could have gone right did. Those margins were protected by executing SOP every time, not only when someone is looking. Can this safety-first culture reverberate through other industries? If you lead with safety, everything else follows. Understand the risk, identify and mitigate, protect the safety margins. How are we going to do this? Over the next 15 years, your industry is 50% of the current insurance workforce will retire. It's a jarring number. More than 400,000 we saw. Positions unfilled. It runs parallel in aviation as well. 50% of the pilots are retiring in the next 15 years. We must integrate IT solutions with humans at the center of those solutions needed to come. Those solutions need to come with those who have deep industry knowledge, deep domain knowledge to help the next generation succeed. Transitioning from airline captain to CEO of VTR, Visionary Training Resources, was an unexpected but incredibly fulfilling journey. I've got no time for Q&A, but I'll be around. So as a pilot, I've always embraced the role of operations leader. And every time I entered that cockpit over the years, I honed my skills and mastered the craft of flying. But I saw an opportunity to take my expertise a step further by delving into technology. And when I did this, I couldn't spell IT. At VTR, my team and I have worked tirelessly to convert the complexities of complex cockpit tasks into virtual reality learning experiences on the ground. It's about more than just making the process more efficient. It's about solving significant challenges within the aviation industry and preparing the next generation of pilots for the demand of modern flight. The aviation world operates with a zero error tolerance, where every procedure must be executed flawlessly for the safety of all on board. This same ethos is what drives our work at VTR, where we strive for 100% accuracy in our virtual reality training simulations. We understand that excellence is not a goal, it's a necessity. And our story at VTR is one of expertise meeting innovation, of leveraging operational know-how to pioneer technological solutions. It's about bridging the gap between the cockpit and the training world, ensuring that pilots are equipped with the skills and knowledge to excel in their careers and protect the public. I encourage you to take proactive steps toward improving safety, managing the risks, and fostering a culture of leadership in your organization, utilizing technology to reduce that lift, to ease that lift. And those of you with the deep domain knowledge who will be part of the Great Resignation, you are all very successful. What are you going to do to be significant? Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, we have time for a couple questions. You
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Evey. Okay, my question is, you shared a lot of what you accomplished. What was it like going back for your MBA after everything you've accomplished? Was that weird? How did you get to that decision, and what was it like?
Scary. Continuing the learning process in my life has been so important. I was old. Everyone else was like young whippersnappers at the school. Just taking the exam to get in, I was like, do we have a number 2 pencil? So, but it's one of the best things I ever did. This never would have happened had I not been exposed to people in my group who had nothing to do with aviation. And it's the cross-cultural knowledge from different industries that makes you look at things in a way that you never would have looked at before. So, thank you. We do hard things. Anyone else? I know there's questions out there for sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of two parts. Number one, how much runway did you have left after your incident? And number two, do you use that scenario in your virtual reality training?
Very good questions. So looking outside, the runway is marked differently the last 3,000 feet, right? So you can see looking outside if you have 2,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. We were about at the 3,000 foot mark. Yeah, which was a really great trigger for me to release those auto brakes and taxi off the runway. As you can imagine, the brakes heat up very fast when you're doing a rejected takeoff. That key component of getting rid of the auto brakes and getting off the runway saved the evacuation. The landing gear was at 980 degrees, the brakes. Our fuse plugs, so the tires have fuse plugs in them that will melt so they don't explode from heat. Our fuse plugs melt at 1,000 degrees. So, really good question. I forgot the second part.
Do you use that scenario in your training?
So I don't yet. VR is very basic, tip of the iceberg right now. We are doing thought processes, flows, procedures, and call-outs to make the pilots comfortable in their environment and be able to move higher up the skills acquisition curve once they get to the simulator. But those scenarios are on our roadmap to be trained. That scenario and many more that happen every day are on our roadmap to be trained.
I got one more.
Okay.
Are you going to do any work with the airplane manufacturers?
I'm not touching that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.